There is a particular kind of silence that falls over an empire in the moment it realizes it is not, in fact, invincible. In the spring of 1587, that silence belonged to Spain. Philip II, ruler of the largest empire the world had ever known, was assembling a fleet so vast it would carry the name of God into battle, the Armada, meant to end English defiance once and for all. And into the middle of that preparation, uninvited and unannounced, sailed a single English commander with 4 royal ships and a fleet of privateers, headed straight for the beating heart of Spanish naval power, the harbor of Cádiz. His name was Francis Drake, and by 1587 the Spanish already had a word for him. They called him El Draque, the Dragon. Sailors along the Spanish Main told stories of him, the way children tell stories of monsters, half in fear, half in disbelief that one man could cause so much damage to an empire that spanned 2 hemispheres. But nothing in those stories had prepared Cádiz for what was coming. Cádiz was not some distant colonial outpost. It was one of the most important ports in Spain, a fortified harbor guarded by shore batteries, galleys, and the confidence that comes from being the seat of the most powerful navy on earth. No enemy fleet had any business being there. And that, precisely, was what made Drake's arrival so devastating. Not the size of his force, but the sheer audacity of where he chose to strike. On the 29th of April, Drake's ships appeared at the mouth of the harbor, and for a long, disorienting moment, the Spanish did not know what they were looking at. English warships did not sail into Cádiz. It was not a possibility anyone had planned for, which meant there was no plan to stop it. Word reached the shore batteries too late to matter. Merchant vessels loaded with supplies for the Armada, wine, biscuit, timber, barrel staves meant to carry food and water across the English Channel, sat at anchor with their crews ashore, utterly unprepared for a fight. Drake did not hesitate. He sailed his squadron directly into the harbor, past the guns that were supposed to make such a thing impossible, and opened fire. What followed was less a battle than a systematic dismantling. Spanish galleys attempted to engage the English ships and were driven off, their oars and light construction no match for English broadsides at close range. One by one, the ships riding at anchor in Cádiz harbor were boarded, stripped of anything valuable, and set ablaze. The fires spread across the water through the night, lighting the harbor in a glow that could be seen for miles, a beacon of humiliation visible to every Spanish official who had assured Philip that his coastline was secure. By the time Drake withdrew, roughly 30 ships had been destroyed or captured, vessels loaded with the very provisions the Armada would need to sustain a campaign against England. It was not simply a raid, it was a wound struck directly into the timetable of an empire. For the Spanish commanders on shore, the psychological toll was arguably worse than the material loss. They had watched, powerless, as an enemy fleet operated inside their own harbor with something close to contempt for their defenses. Reports sent back to Madrid struggled to explain how it had happened because there was no comfortable explanation. It was not a failure of courage. It was a failure of imagination. Nobody in the Spanish Naval Command had believed an English force would dare sail this deep into Spanish waters, so close to the seat of Spanish power, and simply set it on fire. Drake understood something his enemies did not yet grasp, that the greatest fear you can inflict on a superpower is not the fear of destruction at sea, but the fear that nowhere, not even home, is safe anymore. When word finally reached Philip in Madrid, it arrived not as a single dramatic report, but as a slow accumulation of bad news, each dispatch worse than the last, each one confirming what the king did not want to believe. His response was not to reconsider the invasion of England, it was to double down on it. Philip ordered the rebuilding effort accelerated, pulling timber, rope and provisions from every corner of the Iberian coast to replace what had burned in Cádiz harbor. But an empire cannot simply will lost months back into existence. Shipwrights worked through a summer and winter they had not planned for. Provisions meant to last a campaign season had to be regrown, rebrewed, reprovisioned from nothing, and every Spanish port commander now understood, in a way none of them had before Drake's raid, that the safety of their own harbors could no longer be assumed. Ships that might once have sailed together under a single confident timetable were now scattered across multiple ports for fear of a second Draque striking again before the fleet was ready. That fear did not fade quietly. It settled into Spanish naval planning like a splinter, shaping decisions through the rest of 1587 and into the early months of 1588, long after the smoke over Cádiz had cleared. The armada that would eventually leave Spanish waters was larger, in some respects, than the one originally planned, built partly out of a determination to answer humiliation with overwhelming force. But it was also a fleet assembled under pressure, a full year behind its original schedule, commanded by men who now knew, at the back of their minds, that English audacity had already reached further into Spanish territory than anyone had thought possible. The armada that finally set sail for England was not simply late, it was a fleet shaped by the memory of a single afternoon in Cádiz harbor, when the empire's own front door had been kicked open and set alight in full view of its own soldiers. This is why the raid on Cádiz belongs at the very beginning of England's greatest naval story, not as a footnote to the Armada, but as its true opening chapter, before English fireships would send the Invincible Armada into panicked disarray along the English coast, before Spanish sailors would watch their formation shatter in the dark. There was Cádiz, the moment an empire first understood that this smaller, poorer, less numerous rival at the edge of Europe was not going to wait quietly for its own destruction. It would strike first, strike hard, and strike exactly where it hurt the most, and it would leave Spain to sail into 1588 already carrying the wound. If stories like this, of English commanders who refused to wait for the odds to be fair, are the kind of history that stirs something in you, this channel exists to tell them properly, one battle at a time, and there is a great deal more of England's history still to come. Consider subscribing so the next chapter finds you when it's ready, because the story of what happens when that delayed, wounded armada finally reaches English waters in 1588 is next. There are moments that decide the fate of kingdoms, and this was one of them, a single act of audacity that bent the timetable of an empire and left it to sail into its greatest test, already carrying a wound. What you are about to witness happened. This is British Battlecry.